I want to welcome those people that are coming back to my podcast. I guess we can call these podcasts. And I got Brian Smith with me here, and Brian is one of my newer friends, probably last year or so. And we've had conversations, and I've been interviewed on your show.
Mhm.
And so I felt you had a message that really needed to be said and presented, because we were talking earlier and this last week and even today about the fact that more and more people, while they're locked down and they can't go anywhere, they get all this time to think about things going on in their life. And one
Mhm.
of those things is losing a parent, losing a child, losing a spouse, a friend, a sibling. And after a couple of months of lockdown, it's really become depressing for a lot of people. A lot of people are reaching out. And they're coming to me, and and I'm going, I lost two brothers and I lost a lot of people in my life, but I looked at your life story and all that you've done, and you've taken it to another level, because you've taken it literally from grief to a solution. And so, Brian, you deserve a huge introduction. But I'm going to write that down below, because I want you to get to your message and what you say. So first off, what is this foundation that you have? How to get started? What was your inspiration? I'll just let you roll, and I'm not going to interrupt you.
Okay, cool. Well, let me, first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being on with you, Reverend Bill. As you said, you and I are relatively new friends, but we hit it off right away. We've had some great conversations. You were on my show, and people were fascinated by hearing about you. To tell you a little bit more about me, it kind of makes sense to lay some background. Um, from the time I was a small child, I was raised in a fundamentalist home, and I was raised with the belief in heaven and hell, and this judgmental God I couldn't understand why he hated me, basically, because he wanted to send me to hell. So I was raised with this tremendous fear of death, a feeling of loneliness, a feeling of not belonging, and frankly, not even wanting to be in this world, because why would I come here and take the risk of going to eternal damnation if I just made a mistake? So that was kind of what started me on this road to a fear of death. So in my 20s and 30s, it came to a head where it's like, I just can't function like this anymore. I was having panic attacks. My uncle passed away, and I was told because my uncle was gay that he was in hell, and that didn't make any sense to me. So I was like, I've got to find a whole new way of looking at this. And if it means the destruction of my faith, then so be it. I'll take that risk. Because that was really all I had. Even though it was literally driving me crazy, that was all I had. So I thought I was taking a big risk by examining this. But fortunately, this is around the time the internet was coming around, and I found so much information on the internet that really helped me in terms of how to read the Bible, how to understand what it really meant. I studied the background of where the Bible came from, Bible history. I read books about the way the Bible was developed. I started reading other texts. I started reading the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada, other texts, things that gave me a broader perspective. And I realized that while the Bible contains a lot of truth, it's not the entire truth, and it's not entirely true. So I started understanding that this God that I'd been told was judgmental and I should fear was actually the love that they told me he was, because I couldn't see how he could be both. He couldn't be so judgmental and be pure love at the same time. And I was told that God loves us unconditionally and more than we could ever love our own children. Well, then I have my own children. And I looked at them and I said, I could never judge them. I could never turn my back on them for a moment. So how could God send me to hell eternally for a simple mistake of not choosing the right religion? So all these things kind of came to a culmination. And then I started studying the afterlife. I started studying mediumship, near-death experiences, afterlife communications. I'm an engineer by training. I'm a very analytical person. So having faith is great, but I wanted to know. I wanted to know, can I know? How much can I know? Is there anything that proves this? So then, we've had this explosion over the last 100 years of physics saying, yes, the world is a crazy place. The universe is so much more magical than we possibly could know. Quantum physics has told us that. Max Planck said over 100 years ago, and he was a Nobel Prize winner in physicism. He said that consciousness is fundamental, that the material follows the consciousness. And we've been taught the opposite. We've been taught this material universe where at the Big Bang, suddenly out of nowhere, everything was formed. And then 13 billion years later, consciousness arose. That story we're starting to find out makes no sense whatsoever. It's consciousness that precedes the material. The material is kind of like, if you want to look at it, it's kind of like slowed down consciousness. I mean, when we're in these physical bodies, we're still just consciousness. So I had all these things coming together for me. And this brings us up to the time I was probably in my early 50s. And then I have a wife and two daughters. They are my life. I mean, I live for them. And my 15-year-old daughter, Shayna, suddenly passed away in 2015. Shayna was like the brightest child, extremely intelligent, very attractive, very popular, played volleyball at a national level, played basketball at a national level, huge zest for life. And then suddenly one day she was gone. She went to bed one night, June 23rd, 2015. It'll be 5 years in a week. She went to bed one night and just didn't wake up the next morning.
Is that her lovely picture there in the background?
Yeah, this is Shayna.
Yeah.
Shayna is always over my shoulder. Literally, when I talk to mediums, they're like, she's always in the room with you. She never lets me forget that she is the entire inspiration for everything that I do. She's guiding me. She's still with me. We still have a relationship, and Shayna's the reason why I do what I do. So after Shayna passed in June of 2015, I mean, things just got crazy in terms of synchronicities. Someone said, why don't you reach out to a guy named Mark Ireland? He lost his son. He's written a couple of books about it. So I reached out to Mark. Mark sent me his books. He and I started exchanging emails. He told me about an organization called Helping Parents Heal. So my wife planned a vacation. My girls and I always like to go to the beach. Kayla said, let's not go to the beach this year because it'll remind me too much of Shayna. Let's go to the opposite. Let's go to the desert. So we went to Phoenix, first time we'd ever been to Arizona. That happens to be where Elizabeth Boisson, who's the president of Helping Parents Heal, the founder, lives. So I met with Elizabeth, joined Helping Parents Heal, started meeting people, Mark Pitstick, Gary Schwartz, all these people that have become a huge part of my life now. Listening to Sandra Champlain's podcast, We Don't Die. I've been a guest on her program now. All these things in my life just started like falling into my life. People, conferences, places. So about a year ago, I said, I really want to take this like to the next level. So I was taking a business mentorship class with the guy. It's called a Master Heart program. And I was working on my existing business, which is I sell hair care products. And I had no idea. And another friend said, Brian, I saw this great life coaching course. Why don't you take this life coaching course? I'd never had any interest in being a life coach. And I was like, okay, I'll take the course. Took the life coaching course and said, this is what I need to do. So I started Grief to Growth, which is my website. And that's where I have my grief guide business. I call myself a grief guide because I help people understand what grief is, what to expect when you're going through a grief. I teach people techniques for how you can deal with grief because it is a process, it is a journey, and it is a lot of hard work. And I also help people form a new relationship with death. Because the thing about grief, in terms of when someone passes away, and I hesitate to use the word died. It's not because I'm not in denial that people die, because these physical bodies they go away, but we never stop existing. And that's the message I try to help people understand. So between a combination of understanding what grief is, how we can deal with grief, and then taking a new look at what death is as simply a transition that our loved one is taken, and that we're going to take one day too, and we're going to see them again, and they're here with us right now over our shoulder, that if we can get all those things together, then it makes the journey bearable. And I don't tell people you're not going to feel grief. It's not going to not suck. It does suck. It's hard work. I still have bad days. I still have bad times. There are times I'm like, why did I take this mission on? But having that higher sense of who we are and knowing our loved ones are okay can make it so much easier. It makes it bearable. and you can start to actually have a renewed sense of purpose in life. I mean, and when I talk to people that are in early grief, it's, I always hesitate to say, something good can come of this, because they're like, well, nothing good can come from my loved one die. I don't want to hear that. And believe me, I did not want to hear that. People told me, you're going to go on, Brian, you're going to be around 5 years later. I said, I don't plan to be here in 5 years. When Shayna passed away, I was 54 years old. I didn't want to be here in 5 years. That's how I felt. So we can acknowledge those feelings, and we can validate those feelings, because they're going to happen. But I am here, and I'm grateful for what I've gone through. I'm grateful that she's, like I said, still with me and still inspiring me. And my goal is to make her proud of me. I want to make Shayna, like I said, I do what I do for her. And I know every time I say that, she just lights up, because Shayna thought she was the center of the world anyway. And she's definitely the center of my universe. And, I have two girls, and she'd always say, tell me, Daddy, tell me I'm your favorite. It's okay. You can tell me Kayla's not here.
Well, all right. So you were handling this thing. I'm looking at this thing as like you had two lives. You had the life up until she died.
Yeah.
Okay. And now you had this in-between ground while you regrouped, rebuilt, restructured, kind of like the $6 million man. You had to have all these experiences to become better and more super.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you now, and if I would have met you 5.5 years, 6 years ago, we wouldn't have the same conversation. It would be a whole different level of relationship.
Yeah.
You've become softer. I hate to say this, but you're softer. You're more compassionate, if that's possible. I didn't know you before, but the feeling is you've grown with this, literally from this grief to growth. You really mean that. You've grown.
I do. The thing is, when I've gone through, and we all go through things in our lives, and it was Kierkegaard that said, life has to be lived forward, but can only be understood backwards. And that's the way life works. So, when you go through tragedies in your life, and I can go back from the time I was 12 or 13 years old and something happened to me, I thought was the end of my world. When I was in my early 20s, something happened, I thought was the end of my world. When I started having this crisis of faith, this dark night of the soul, when I said, is the Bible true? And if the Bible's not true, what does my life mean? But every time I would step out and I'd say, let me explore this. Let me not be afraid of the truth. And let me hope that the truth, lifts me up as a positive, but I'm not going to turn away from the truth. And every time I've grown through that. And my faith, if you want to call it faith, has grown to the point where it's not even faith anymore. It's not belief. It's a knowing. So I've stepped out on that. And, I went through a divorce when I was in my early 20s. I remember meeting my wife, my wife now, and she said, I really wish you hadn't been divorced. I really don't want to be with the divorced guy. And I said, if I hadn't been divorced, I wouldn't be the person that I am now, because I learned how not to be a husband from my previous failed marriage. I learned how not to do certain things. So we learn from our mistakes, and we should never regret our mistakes. And these things that happen to us, even up to the passing of a child, can be a springboard for the next phase of your life. And it's, again, never to diminish that passing, never to say that I would not want Shayna back. But I know that I still have her with me, and I know that I will see her again. So it's not goodbye, it's see you later. And that's the way I look at it.
You realize, you've probably been told this, I'm picking up that you've probably been told this in the past, that there are agreements before we come into this life. When you're on the other side, she knew she was going at a certain age, and you accepted that because you needed that to happen to become the person you are today, to help other people.
Yeah.
So this whole thing is about letting that energy flow out like a rock in a pond, right? And there's waves and ripples, and you're part of those ripples. Her passing caused ripples.
Oh man, yeah, big time.
Positive way.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, Shayna, and I work with a lot of parents who have lost children, and everybody thinks their child is special, and all children are special. But there's something that these kids that go early seem to have in common. It's a big zest for life. They're usually very attractive, bright lights around the people around them. They inspire people even before they pass. Shayna was 16 out of like 600 in her class in school. We homeschooled her for 8 years. And then she went to school. She only went to public school for 2 years. But when she passed, there were probably like 500 people that came to her service. She was a 15-year-old girl who'd only been in public school for 2 years. There are girls now to this day, they call themselves the Shayna Six. And they were 6 little girls that used to hang out with her when they were 15 years old. They're all 21 now, and they're all in college, but they still come every anniversary date, every birthday. They come to our house. They've used Shayna to write as inspiration for their essays, for their college entrances. So she made huge ripples, but she always had this huge zest for life. She was always like, I wonder what this feels like. I wonder what that feels like. And she left us little clues. She would say things like, I don't ever want to grow up. I remember when she was about 10, she started crying, and we were like, Shayna, what's wrong? She said, I don't want to grow up. I don't want to be an adult. She loved being a child. And she just embraced, every moment that she was here. And literally about 6 weeks before she passed, she was playing with my other daughter. We were up in Columbus, where I'm from, at my parents' house, or my brother's house. And this was on Mother's Day. And she said, when I die, I'd like to be buried under a tree. I want to be cremated and buried under a tree. And she was 15 years old. And I asked my daughter, I didn't learn this after she had passed. And I asked my other daughter, I said, why did she say that? She said, I don't know. No one else was talking about that, Shayna. She just said it. So, that was 6 weeks before she passed. When she did pass, we had to make a decision. Are we going to, bury her body or cremate her body? And notice I said her body, not her. And we decided to do cremation. That was validation for me that was her wishes. So that made that decision a whole lot easier.
That's an unusual subject matter. Bring up a 15-year-old girl in the prime of her teenage years to even be thinking about that.
Yeah.
But there must have been some premonition or of purpose in her life at that stage.
Yeah. Well, like I said, when she was born, literally the night she was born, the nurses went to my wife in the hospital and said, you got your hands full, just by the way that she cried. When she was 2 years old, I remember she was playing in our other room here, and I looked at her and I said to her mother, I said, I hope she uses her powers for good and not for evil, because she was an extremely determined child. Anything she put her mind to, she did it. She, as I said, she played basketball for, I think about 8 years, and she was played at a really high level. She was being recruited for the high school team. And then she said, I want to play volleyball. And I said, Shayna, you've never played volleyball in your life. You've been training for basketball since you were in kindergarten. You're like in 8th grade now. Why would you want to go out for volleyball? I'm just bored with basketball. I want to play volleyball. I said, okay, well, you can try it. We took her to training for a couple of weeks. It was about 3 months, I think, over the summer. She tried out for the high school team. She made the high school team, the freshman team. She started on the high school team. And then she said, I want to go out for this traveling team. And we said, or AAU traveling team. I said, well, Shayna, you can go out, but this is your first year playing volleyball. You're probably not going to make it. She calls up. She says, they asked me to be on the national team, not the regional team.
Wow.
So the week before she passed, she spent a week in Florida at a national volleyball tournament. So, I say these things to say that, it's kind of like she knew that she wasn't going to be here a long time. She wanted to pack in as much life as she could. And I truly believe that. So I blame Shayna. I think this plan was her plan. And when I see her, I'm going to give her a swat for that. But it sounds like something that she would set up.
Oh, yeah. All right. So this is personal. And so you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But since she's been gone, have you felt, you say you kind of feel closest. You kind of alluded to the fact that she's with you. Have you had anything happen that you consider more than just happens, things, circumstances, or presence being there? Have you felt it really?
It's hard to even know where to start and where to end with that. I mean, everything from, like, when she passed, I said, Shayna, I'd like for you to send me dimes. People find coins. I said, pennies. Okay, fine. Let's make our thing dimes. So give you one quick story. She passed in July, or in June. We were on vacation with my other daughter, our first vacation together in August. So it's just a couple months after she passed. I was having a really rough day. And so, because we're up in a hotel room, it's just the three of us, Shayna would normally be there. So I'm out for a walk by myself early in the morning, like I always do. And I said, I need you to send me a sign today, Shayna, just something. And so we're getting on the van to take us to the ferry to go across to the island. And my wife and my other daughter get in the back of the van. I bend my head down to get in the seat behind them. As I bend my head down, there's a single dime sitting under the seat. So with things like that, it's the timing. It's like, it was a dime. It wasn't a quarter. It wasn't nickel. It was a thing that we had agreed on. So everything from that to turning our ceiling fans on and off and making lights flicker in the house. And she's messed with my computer before. And then I've had a medium reading in the week after, and they're like, no, Shayna said she did something with the computer. Um, last week, I've been very involved with what's going on with this whole racism thing that's going about now. And I've been very vocal on Facebook and everything. And someone had criticized me for sowing hate and division, and I was feeling like, okay, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. So that day, my wife comes up from the basement where she works, and she said, I just found these documents on our OneDrive, something that Shayna wrote. It was an essay that Shayna written about Emmett Till and Trayvon Martin. And this Emmett Till, for people that don't know, was a young black boy who was accused of, I believe it was, I can't remember his rape or what he was accused of, but he was beaten to death by a group of white vigilantes, and became a very, very, famous case. And then Trayvon Martin was shot, I think it was in 2012, by a guy named George Zimmerman. He was an unarmed teenager that was shot. Shayna had written an essay on that. So Shayna wrote the essay. We didn't know the essay existed. Shayna passed away 5 years ago next week. We'd never seen this essay. The very day, the very week that I'm being attacked for what I'm doing in this work, I find her essay about these two young African-American boys and how she talked about the racism that her mother and I had experienced that we expressed to her. She talked about her disappointment that it was 2014 or whatever year it was she wrote this, that things hadn't gotten any better. It was like a time capsule. It was like she sent me a message from the other side that she wrote, at least 3 years ago. No, at least 5 years ago.
And you did discover to that day you were questioning it. I mean, that week.
Yeah. So, and this is just a couple of small things. She drops in on mediums. One of her favorite mediums is a woman named Suzanne Giesman. So she'll drop in Suzanne, and Suzanne will deliver messages to us that, Shayna, said this a couple of weeks ago. She called up, and Suzanne was working with a couple, and she thought it might be good for them to get to meet us. And Suzanne is one of those people, she always wants to validate with evidence. So she said she felt like Shayna was telling her to contact us. So she calls my wife up. She says, Shayna's telling me to contact you. She said, by the way, are you buying a pool table or something? Because I'm seeing green material, like green felt. I don't understand why I'm seeing this. I didn't even know this. My wife the day before had been on the internet looking up how to make a green screen for her Zoom meetings. And she'd been looking at green muslin. So, and I mean, just hundreds of stories like that from Shayna. I don't get, some people can go into meditation and they see their loved ones and they hear them and stuff like that. I don't get that, but what I've been told is she's just with me all the time. I mean, she's just like a little voice in my head, and I get downloads, like I'll get up in the morning. It's like, write about this, do a video about this. So again, just last week I woke up and I was like, okay, talk about racism. Try to explain to people what racism is. And I'm like, okay, I've been trying to do this for years. I can't do this. People are going to pull out the dictionary. They're going to say, here's a definition of racism. It doesn't say anything about systemic racism in there. You're just making this up. There's no such thing as systemic racism. So this is what I'm thinking as I'm walking down the stairs to come to my office to make the recording. I get on Facebook and I find out that there's an article that just came out that this African-American woman approached Merriam-Webster dictionary to say, this is the way what racism really means. And they added a second definition of racism for systemic racism. And I've discovered it on the very day I was going to sit down to make that recording. And I was told to make this recording. And so, yeah, things like that happen.
Not something which just happened regularly. That's out of the blue. I'm already a believer. But when I hear stories like that, that tells me that somebody's opened the door. They're willing to hear what's on the other side. You surrender reality basically to what is.
Mm-hmm.
And so you also you originally joined this other group that you met the lady. What was that called? It's the
Helping Parents Heal.
And that's a pretty good sized group, if I remember right. I watched.
Yeah, I've lost track, and Elizabeth's going to kill me for not knowing this number, but it's like 12 or 14,000 people now.
Wow. So this is not an issue that's going away. I mean, every generation people are dying off, right? So yeah. We're having to deal with this. Now your attitude has kind of shifted from the heaven and hell, all this kind of stuff, to you're kind of in that middle path, almost between Christianity and Buddhism. You're kind of like
Hmm.
someplace softer in the middle there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how I would describe it. I was talking with someone just a couple of days ago. We were talking about Christianity. And I was, as I said, I was raised a Christian. Most of my family is still Christians. I don't identify as Christian any longer. Not because I'm not a fan of Jesus. I'm Jesus' biggest fan. Uh, so I'm a huge fan of Jesus. I just don't view Jesus as having died for my sins in terms of saving me from a fiery hell. And I have a lot of other differences with a lot of Christians. So I don't call myself a Christian anymore, but I love the Bible. I still quote the Bible all the time. There's a lot of great stuff in the Bible. I've studied Buddhism. I think Buddhism as a philosophy is very, very appealing. I think there's some things that people that follow Buddhism don't have quite right, like there's no true self, for example. Um, so I'm somewhere in the middle. I use a very Buddhist philosophy. As I said, I follow Jesus as an example. So that's kind of where I am in terms of the religion. I jokingly tell people I practice Brianism because I take whatever from everything. And I remember specifically in Sunday school them saying, religion is not it's not a buffet. It's not a go pick what you want. You've got to take everything or take nothing. And I believe exactly the opposite of that. I think that God, source, the force, creator, whatever you want to call him, it comes through all kinds of ways, through all kinds of people. And I remember reading Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God. And people are like, well, this is crazy. How could this guy think he's talking to God? But every day, billions of Christians pick up the Bible and think that these people were talking to God. And I'm not saying they weren't. So if they were, then why won't he talk to Neil Donald Walsh? Why won't he talk to Bill McDonald? Why won't he talk to me? So I think anything that I read could be inspired, whether it's between the pages of the Bible or something that somebody wrote yesterday.
And since there's a philosophy of people out there, spiritual people, that believe that we are all God.
Yeah.
Therefore, whatever Brian Smith says is coming from the lips of God. We're all God, right? So everything is coming from him. So you're having a conversation with God when you're talking to your mirror.
It's a really, really deep concept. And it's frankly, when I first heard that, sounds blasphemous to say I'm God. It doesn't mean that I am inclusive. I'm all, of God. But the way I've come to look at it is God kind of divided himself up in all these little tiny parts to experience himself through himself. So, and I was reading a great analogy yesterday about we're like cells in the body, right? So cells in the body, we don't know if they have any consciousness of the body or not. We don't know if our cells know that there's a body, but they have a function, and they know that they have a function. Then they organize into organs. So we have heart cells, we have kidney cells, we have lung cells, and they all have parts to play. But we, as our consciousness, say, well, that's my kidney, that's my lung, that's this cell. So we view it from that level, where the cells might be viewing it from a different level. So as we are incarnated in these bodies that we're incarnated into right now, as we're talking to each other, we don't really recognize that we're also part of this bigger body, this bigger collection. So we're all literally one.
It's interesting. When I was hiking around the Himalayas, my first trip, 2004, and I met some guy up there in one of these lofty, it was only, 15, 16,000 feet. I wouldn't call it a lofty peak, but it was high mountain for me.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy was telling me, it was kind of a ragged looking guy alongside the road, with ratty hair and everything, with a baking bowl. And he's telling me this stuff that that thousands and thousands of years ago, before Jesus and Buddha and all that, he says, the Nath yogi used to believe that if you had some kind of device, which we call a microscope or a telescope, right? Microscope, you look at something that's really tiny, like a drop of water, and if it gets magnified and magnified, you find there's like a world in there of things.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's atoms. It looks like the solar system. And then if you look at the stars, that's like blown up there. So if you go bigger or micro, in or out, it all looks like the universe.
Yeah.
And so this guy's telling me with a wink, kind of winks to me, and he says, maybe we're looking at those stars, and that's really just the molecular structure of some greater being.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. And what's amazing about that story is this is what science is starting to catch up with. These guys that knew this stuff, I guess it was revealed. We call it revealed knowledge, I guess. They knew it before we had the technology to figure it out. And then we come along a couple thousand years later, we developed the technology, and it's like, they're right. There's a whole world when you go down, I mean, and also when you go down far enough, there is really no matter. I mean, there's everything that appears to be matter, even an atom itself. When I was in school, which was longer ago than most people would care to admit, but when I was in college, like 40 years ago, we were told an atom was like this little thing, and these electrons spin around it, and we imagined it was like a little ball. Well, the thing is, an atom, if you had something that was like, I live in Cincinnati, if the nucleus of an atom was the size of a basketball, the electrons would be 20 miles away in Dayton. That's how much space there is in an atom, and we just can't even comprehend that nothing that we look at that appears to be solid is solid. It's all basically space and vibrating energy.
And those of us that believe that vibration is love,
Yeah.
and you've experienced a lot of that, and you're helping these people because people are coming to you. You're not having to go out there and beat them in the head to come in. They're coming to you. And I got a feeling that your workload is going to keep increasing. And I say workload because I don't think you think of it as a workload. I think of it as your chosen duty right now.
It's what I'm here to do. It's literally what I'm here to do. That's why there's a song I love by James Taylor. I was whenever I say that, it's that's why I'm here. So when people ask me about what do you do, it's like, I do this because that's why I'm here. This is my function. This is what I was made to do. Yeah, and the thing is, you touched upon it in the earlier part when you were doing the introduction. What I'm also finding is grief is not just about the loss of a loved one, the physical loss of a loved one. It can be about the loss of a job, loss of a relationship, about lots of losses. And what the coronavirus, and then there's also this thing we're going through with George Floyd, has triggered in people is, well, a couple of things. One is, as you said, we're spending a lot of time alone, indoors, locked down. So people are having a lot of time to reflect, which is a good thing. But we have to be able to, to direct that in the right way. And people that are going through grief, it's deepening that grief. It's triggering, because when we're in grief, there's these triggers that actually make things, can intensify things. So I'm finding people are coming to me saying, I actually just last week someone said, well, I haven't experienced the physical loss of a child, but I'm estranged from my child. And I said, it's really smart that you recognize that's actually a form of grief. The loss of freedom can cause grief. Right now people can't go out. So there's all kinds of loss that we go through that can trigger this feeling of, and that's what grief is. Grief is a feeling of loss. It's things are not the way they're supposed to be.
Well, we're evolving as a species. We're evolving as a culture. We're evolving as a universe, hopefully. And we're not going to be remaining the same. It's insane to think that nothing's going to change, number one.
Right.
And people are hanging on to belief systems, which are dissolving as we sit here talking. Around the world, things are changing. I mean, they're changing all over the world. A few years ago, we had the spring uprising.
Yeah.
All the Muslim spring, what was it called? Spring something.
The Arab Spring.
Arab Spring.
Yeah.
Because it was a common consciousness in all these Muslim nations that, hey, look, we want a certain thing. And now we're seeing this, what's happening in America is spread to the world because there's the same feeling of pent-up anger, frustration, whatever it may be. And then this virus is causing another whole set of circumstances.
Yeah.
But we're in the grips. I go back to the 1960s when everything looked like it was falling apart. And I come back to Vietnam, everything was falling apart. My God, it's so terrible. But we needed that, because we stepped up on laws. There was change.
Yeah.
Not as much as could have been, but there was change from, let's face facts. You weren't alive in the 1950s as too old anyway. 1950s, if you look back to stereotype family, the father knows best, and household with different women were relegated to staying at home, not working unless they were a school teacher or a nurse. So we've made changes. And the good news is I'm watching my grandkids now, and they're going to be living in a world, once we get through all this garbage, things are going to evolve. So I'm not sitting back like a worried wart, because everybody gets, oh my God, change is good.
Right.
It's like, got a friend in real estate. They buy a house, and they go in there, and I go to visit the housing site where they're at. They got the roof turned off. They got the cabinets torn down. They torn up the bathroom. They're working on the foundation. I go, my God, it's worse when you got it. Yeah, it's just part of change. We'll come back in a few months, right?
Yeah. Well, that's humans grow through pain. And, you say that to people and they say, I wish it didn't have to be that way, but it's actually, it's evolutionary if you think about it. If as a species, if what you're doing is working, you're going to keep doing it. That you're going to maintain homeostasis, you're going to spend the least amount of energy. Change requires energy. So as long as I'm doing something that's working, I'm going to keep doing it. Whatever it happens to be. I'm only going to change when there's enough pain or discomfort that says I have to do it a different way. That's the way we grow. So when you see the pain, you can say, this is an opportunity for change, or you can throw up your hands and say, why is this happening to me? So every time there's some painful event, some triggering event, look for what is the lesson here? What do we want to do? The other thing is you were going to it reminded me there's something called punctuated equilibrium in evolution. We go through long periods where species stay basically the same. And then we go through these periods of rapid change. That's the way human consciousness seems to develop. Also, we again look back through history, like Kierkegaard says, you have to look at things backwards. We can see these periods of enlightenment, these periods where everybody at the same time. This happens in the animal kingdom too, where at the same time one species will develop something, or one group will develop something on this side of the world, and on the other side of the world they'll develop the exact same thing, and people have no idea how this happens. So we're all a lot more collected than we realize. And right now we're going through massive pain, massive uncertainty. You know, I find it really interesting because some of the issues are coming up right now. I've been looking at these issues for years, and I've been trying to talk to people about them. And frankly, nobody cared. But now people are opening up their eyes and they're like, oh my God, the world's falling apart. This is terrible. How could this be happening? I'm like, happening for several hundred years, but welcome on board. And so let's do something about it. And so I see this as an opportunity.
Oh,
I really do.
no, doors have been opened, and
Yeah.
you're not gonna, we're not going to go back. I mean, there's no going back now. So I'm happy, but it's painful for everybody. I
It
mean, it's
is.
painful for everybody. Come on, it's hurting in all kinds of levels. But you're one of those candles in the darkness that are helping, and I really appreciate what you're doing. This grief to growth movement. I call it a movement. It's your job.
Yeah.
I call it like a movement because the name really incorporates the image that I have what you do. It really is about growth. And you're right. You can't tell people, oh, good things are going to come out of this. You know, it's like telling somebody just got their leg or their arm amputated, you know, like good things are going to come out of this, you know, and they're still bleeding, right?
Right.
All right.
No, there's a whole process. There are, you know, in my book, I talk about this, you know, the first part of grief, it sucks. I mean, it does. I mean, there's pain, there's disbelief, there's shock, there's anger, there's fear, all these emotions, and they swirl around. And one day you're feeling this way, the next day you're feeling that way, and you're off balance. You feel like everything is over. So I help people with that first part of the grief, you know, too, to say, okay, let's just get through this. Let's just breathe. Let's just try to get through tomorrow. Let's get through the next 5 minutes, you know. So we've got to acknowledge that. And then once we get those things kind of smoothed out, then we can start to look for what's the opportunity here. What can I learn from this? How can I do better? How can I use this to trigger what my purpose is in life? How can I develop this ongoing relationship with my loved one who's no longer physically here? Are you're telling me they're not really gone? You're telling me I can still talk to them. I can still hear from them. So it's a whole process, but we can't. What I really don't like is what I call spiritual bypassing, where people just say it's going to be okay. You know, don't worry about it. You know, you shouldn't feel pain. You shouldn't feel anguish. Not true. And I have to tell a real quick story about Dr. Mary Neal, because she really inspired me when Shayna passed. She had a near-death experience. She got to go to heaven. She got to see Jesus. She was told, you know, she got to see the ripple effect of everything to like the 38th level or something. And she was told that her son was going to pass away like in another 10 years. And so she came back with that knowledge, and I guess she kept it to herself because she didn't want to burden her family. Well, her son did pass away, and she still experienced grief. And so the lesson in that for me was, it's okay for me to experience grief, no matter how spiritual I think I am. It's still okay for me to experience that loss, that pain. You know, Jesus wept when he found out that Lazarus had died. If Jesus could cry, then we can all cry. I mean, it's okay.
And as a nation, as a world right now, this between the virus and the disorder and everything that's happening, we're all kind of experiencing our own way a death, a passing of old ways.
Hmm. Hmm.
People trying to hang on by their fingernails to the past, but we're experiencing a death of different things, whether it's a belief system or whatever. And there's going to be this period of mourning. I think we're kind of in the beginning of that slope right now. Eventually, we'll get down to a point 5 years from now, it's going to be like, is this the way it's always been, right? You know,
Yeah.
your grandkids are going to come to you when you get grandkids. They're going to say, "Was this the way it always was?" It's
Yeah.
like my grandson when he was little. He goes, "Well, how would you feel, Grandpa? They took away your phone when you were a kid."
Yeah, really.
I go,
Yeah.
"What? They'll tear it off the wall. Come on."
Yeah. No, it's very true. And like I said, I have to be very careful because I don't want people to get the feeling like I'm thinking, oh, yippee, we've got coronavirus. I'm not thinking that at all. This is a hard, painful thing we're going through. We've had 116,000 people, that have crossed the other side that probably shouldn't have, or at least some of those people should not have been crossed right now. So I always say, we need to fight injustice. We need to fight inequality. We don't ever want to accept this is just the way things are, because I believe part of the reason we're here is to fight. I think that the pain and stuff is built in part of the plan, because fighting it is why we're here. So I don't want to, but I do look forward to maybe this could be a great awakening. Maybe we look back to the summer of 2020 and say that was a time when we turned the corner. That was a time we started thinking about employment differently, or we started thinking about universal basic income, or we started thinking about racial equality differently, where we said let's do things differently. When we start to look at we're all connected as a globe. I mean, in the past, if something happened in China, in the United States, why would we care? It's happening around the world. Now we got a guy that gets sick in China, and 6 months later, people in the United States are dying. So we have to pay attention to what's going on in China. And maybe the next time there's an outbreak somewhere that we don't, in India, we'll care about it, because we realize that could happen here. Because we kind of have this feeling, that could never happen here. That's not going to happen. I think we all kind of looked at this. And frankly, myself, a couple of weeks before it really broke out, a friend of mine was talking about it. I said, it's not that big of a deal. We've been through stuff like this before, but it's waking us all up. It's making us all. It's changed. It's touched everybody's life. I can't think of another event in human history that where everybody that wakes up in the morning all around the world and is thinking the same thing. They're thinking this could impact me. There's nothing else that can touch everybody in the world at this time that I can think of.
Well, that's kind of a good way to kind of conclude this, because I think you're right. Looking back on 2020, there's two ways we can look at it, and I'm forward thinking like you are, that this is the beginning of a evolution. I'm not into revolutions, but I'm into evolution,
Mm-hmm.
an evolving process, and we take all of us. Some are going to have to kick it and drag it through the streets, but we're all going to travel together, right? Because ultimately we're all one.
Yeah.
And the least of us in pain is not any more comfortable for those that are in power. So I'll be about all of us. And I want to thank you, Brian, for spending time with me. And you brought out some things for hopefully people are going to sit there and think about, watch this video a couple times and share it. And we're obviously going to be talking again as we do. Do you happen to have a copy of your book sitting there close to you anywhere?
I do. You probably won't be able to see it because I'm on a green screen and it's the green book. I did not think this through. So it's going to
Oh,
look transparent.
okay.
But
Okay. Well, that's cool how that works, though. All right.
yeah, but it's Grief to Growth. It's the number 2. That's also my website and my podcast. So it's Grief the number 2 Growth. You can find me. There.
Are you speaking at all at the IANS conference coming up this summer?
I'm going to be moderating a panel for the IANS conference.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to be Yeah.
All right. So for those that are going to tune in on that, there's another voice you're going to hear, and your face will obviously be on that as well. I think it's a video presentation, so that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. God bless you, and I hope your wife is better from her surgery.
Thank you. It's good. It's great talking to you again. I always love talking to you.
All right. God bless you.
Bye.
And for those that are tuning on this, I hope you come back again as we interview other people that I consider interesting friends. This is no doubt one of those that you will enjoy. God bless.